Welcome to Kent Channel. This is the first time that we're going to provide a broadcast in English, and so I hope you can understand it. It's not really meant for Japanese people. Today I want to address my remarks to a group of American historians that I think have made a very bad mistake. I'm sure you have heard that McGraw-Hill recently published a textbook, and it included a passage written by a man named Ziegler and one other man about the comfort women issue during World War II. And it accused Japan of forcibly recruiting 200,000 women to serve as, quote, sex slaves, or the equivalent of that. And it had several other grave errors in it, about 8 big errors in it. And I won't go through all of those today because, I just want to say this. It's very clear that this is not an accurate portrayal of what happened. This is actually historical revisionism, and it's being pushed by some anti-Japanese forces. I use forces in sort of a general term, but there are some anti-Japanese groups in the United States that for some reason want to make it appear that Japan committed some great atrocities in the war, in World War II, which in fact it did not commit. And I'm not sure why they want to do this, but I think their ultimate goal is to weaken the Japanese-American Defense Alliance. That being said, anyway, the article was printed in the new McGraw-Hill textbooks, which have so far only been used in just a very few schools. The Japanese Foreign Ministry, of course, lodged a protest because this is a great affront to the Japanese national honor, and it also creates all kinds of international diplomatic problems which don't need to be had. And so now a group of 19 historians and a group of 19 historians published a protest saying that the Japanese government should not interfere in the content of textbooks. Well, you know, from a freedom of expression point of view, perhaps that's the case, perhaps it's not. But these historians need to be sure that if they want to defend this passage, that it's correct. And it is not correct. And it is very clear to me and to all of the rest of us who have studied this matter and who do understand the underlying facts that the passage is incorrect. So the fact that these people are defending the passage indicates to me that they have not looked at the evidence. Now, as a historian, I'm not a historian, but I have studied a lot of history, and I know lots of historians, and I think most historians do not want to go down in history as having propagated false history. Okay? Now, let me just give some background here. The Japanese, of course, they annexed Korea in the early 1900s, and during World War II, there was a war. They were at war with China and a whole bunch of other people. The allegation is that during World War II, the Japanese army forcibly conscripted 200,000 women, mostly from Korea and China, aged 14 to 20, to serve as what is euphemistically called comfort women, but is actually just prostitutes or camp followers. And but the article further states that these people were virtual sex slaves, that they were forced to work against their will, and that if they tried to escape, they were beat up. And that many of them were killed. Now, everything I just said has no historical basis. In the first place, there is no evidence that the Japanese army forcibly conscripted comfort women. Some of these anti-Japanese groups that I talked about in the United States actually had the United States of America itself conduct a huge survey of all the government records, including the CIA, the FBI, the military. It took 7 years, and they published a report, cost $30 million of American taxpayer money, and the report said that there is not one bit of evidence that that occurred. The only reason this issue ever came up anyway is because of it started in the 1980s. If you'll recall, Japan and Korea concluded a treaty after the war, basic treaty, and that was in 1965. At that time, nobody said anything about comfort women. And I should point out here that the existence of comfort women is almost universal in all theaters of every war. It's not illegal. It's not against international war law. And at the time, prostitution itself was legal. Now, I wouldn't say that most prostitutes necessarily really wanted to be that, but they may have been they may have had to do it because of economic circumstances, or there may be family reasons or whatever. But the idea that Japan actually went out and rounded up by force, kidnapped these women and made them serve as sex slaves is simply not supported by any fact at all. The only reason anybody thinks that might have happened is because a guy named Yoshida published a novel in which he claimed that that was the case. And the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun picked that up and wrote a series of articles claiming that that was true. None of those articles have been corroborated, and neither has the contents of the novel, which, by the way, is a work of fiction, not nonfiction. And in fact, last year, Asahi was forced to retract all of those things, which they did very grudgingly, but they did. To their credit, they did retract all of the articles about that. The second thing about the 200,000 number, to believe that 200,000 would be necessary is ridiculous. Japanese only had probably between 1 and 1.7 million soldiers. Well, they only had 4 million altogether in the whole world, in every theater of war. So there were probably only between 1 and 1.7 million in all of Korea and China. It doesn't take 200,000 prostitutes to service 1.7 million men. If you divide it, and not only that, some people have argued that they had to serve 20, 30, or 40 men a day. If you divide that out, that comes to 6 times of sexual intercourse every day for every soldier to make that number work. That's impossible. In the first place, these people are fighting a war and not carrying on an orgy, for heaven's sake. And not only that, it's not free. These soldiers had to pay for the sexual favors, and they had very low wages. They would use up their entire monthly wage in 2 or 3 days if they were doing that kind of thing. It's just preposterous. It's simply preposterous. What I'd like to say here is you historians really need to get your act together. You need to go back and look at the evidence. And you need to keep an open mind and not be influenced by these agitators who are trying to revise history. This simply didn't happen, okay? It just didn't happen, and unless you can find some evidence that it did, then you should not be lending your name to an inaccurate depiction of what a nation did during a war. And most certainly this should not be taught to young people. Young people should not be taught false things in a school or in a history textbook. So I suggest that you get busy and go back and research this. And if you can find the evidence, then fine. But if not, I think you really need to remove your name from that endorsement of the article and perhaps publish just the opposite, that you most certainly do not endorse the article. And maybe that way you can save your own reputation for future generations. Thank you.